Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another enigmatic episode of The Gold Standard with Alan Mosley. And now here's your host, Blake Osborne.
Hey, how's it going today, guys? Good to be here. Hey, listen, it's a little bit strange today. We're doing something a little bit different. You know, we've been doing this this series of 3, getting to know the people who are involved in making the gold standard. And today it's my turn to host, which is a little bit unusual for me, but we're going to roll with it. Anyhow, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce to you the host of the show, who is typically the host of the show, who is not me, Mr. Alan Mosley.
I was just about to say, now you have some sound effects that add like claps and stuff, right?
I am adding a clap. It's called golf clap. Remember golf clap? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember golf clap.
Okay.
So how's it going?
It's going. So but see, if you're the host, that makes me the producer.
Makes you the producer?
Yeah.
What are you producing today?
So for people who are watching this on YouTube,
yes,
if you saw where it switched to Blake, to Blake and an empty couch,
right,
and then like 20 years later, I walked onto the stage.
Yeah, you threw a T-bar today.
I did that.
That makes you a producer. Mm-hmm. Now you should be proud of yourself. And ladies and gentlemen, if you are interested, you can follow us on, of course, social media on Facebook.com/TGS Alan Mosley, or you can go to Twitter at Alan M. Mosley, or you don't have to do any of that because you can just go to thegoldstandardpodcast.com. Did I do it?
Yeah,
good.
You
awesome.
did it.
Well, great, man. Well, so you're here today and you're in the hot seat. So I guess I've got some questions for you, but the first one I'm going to start off with, and I told you this before the show. I'm going to come right out of the box. I'm going to hit him with everything I've got. This is just straight up. I mean, honestly, let's just go. Let's just cut to the chase.
All
let's
right,
just pan down. You know, we want this done right.
Okay.
What influences in your life made you a libertarian anarcho-capitalist?
Okay, so I say this not boasting, because there's this thing out there in the community of people who will say, well, you know, I've been a libertarian for X amount of time, or, oh, I came around to libertarianism in 2016 with Gary Johnson, which means they're not libertarians. Or I came around because of Ron Paul. A lot of people say, oh, well, 2008, Ron Paul, those debates, man, I was listening to this guy, started reading about him, Googling Ron Paul.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of people are. And that's fine. That's cool.
Yeah.
I was actually a libertarian long before that.
Good.
I like how you say good. Like, because if you weren't,
and if it was just some little minor influences like that suddenly gave you an epiphany, I would wonder where all the strength comes from.
Well, that's okay, because you know, I actually had a friend of mine recently who was saying that, well, you know, so why do we do what we do?
Yeah.
And the easy answer is that, well, we have to kind of keep those ideas alive.
Yeah.
And we have to share them with people, because you never know when some random person in the ether is going to see your article or that comment or whatever you make and say, that sounds crazy.
Yeah.
I've never heard anything like that, so maybe just at a lark, I'm going to Google this and see what this guy's saying.
Yeah. But there's a lot more to it than that. I mean, like, in my conversion process, you know, you were my epiphany. So, you know, not everybody's as fortunate to have him as their epiphany, unless you're watching the show every weekend. If you are, good for you. But, you know, I look up to you because you have a lot to offer people when it comes to your knowledge and your experience in this matter. And, you know, when you say epiphany, you know, it's like going back to the whole Ron Paul thing. I mean, back in those days, you know, I was a hardcore conservative, and I'm looking at this Ron Paul guy, and I'm like, this guy ain't got a shot, you know. You know, but if you would have been around and we would have been real close back then, I think that would have been a much bigger moment for me, because I would have been able to learn so much more.
Well, so to answer your question, because I was there before then, and the answer to that is that, so what are some of the themes that are common in libertarianism or in the liberty community that are common in other communities? And so, you know, I'm from the South, born and raised in Tennessee. Unfortunately, today Tennessee's red state with a lot of traditional conservatives, and by that I mean, of course, they think they're conservative. They're not actually conservatives, but they think they are.
They think they are.
I can talk to someone who's a traditional conservative genuinely, because a traditional conservative would genuinely be fiscal conservatism, limited government, you know, balanced budgets, not expanding welfare state, warfare state. That, I mean, that's what conservatism would really be.
Right.
These people aren't conservatives because they're pro every military intervention.
Yeah.
They're anti every government program they don't want, but they're pro every government program they do want, and they don't see the difference.
It takes a while to get that in your head and realize that those things are definitely not working together with libertarianism. So,
but I came from a small southern community that still had. It's weird because I'm only 33 years old. I was born in 1985. Okay. And even as late as the late 80s and early 90s, you still had some of that kind of fire of Southerners who were distrustful of government. That doesn't necessarily mean they were anti-government the way I am.
Well, you are,
but they're natural distrust, natural distrust of the federal government for sure. A natural disdain for bureaucracy. It wasn't a good thing if you went to a family gathering and said, "Oh, I work for the government." That wasn't a prideful remark, but it is to a lot of people. To a lot of people, they'll go. I actually was just watching a game show last night on TV. It was on in the room, and I was walking by. It was Family Feud or something. Okay. And a lady on the show, it was her turn to do her little 15-second introduction, and she said, "I'm a 29-year employee of the government," and people clapped, and I was like, "That." We would have booed. We would have been the ones. We would have been the ones kicked out. We would have been kicked out of the taping because we would have been the ones booing this lady because that's not something to be proud of. But I mean, I came from a family of people and from a community of people that. I would not call them libertarians. They certainly weren't anarchists, but I wouldn't even call them libertarians. But I would call them at least closer to what a genuine conservative is. And like I said, it's easier to talk to someone whose default position is, well, I'm gonna not trust what the bureaucrat says first and challenge them to prove me wrong, as opposed to the opposite of, I'm gonna believe everything the bureaucrat says and challenge you to prove him wrong. I think that's backwards.
Yeah. In your family, take us back to 8 or 9-year-old Alan. Okay, like the little boy in the picture that we've all seen hiding behind the tree at Thanksgiving dinner. And your mom, your dad, your family situation. What was it like at that dinner table? Were there a lot of discussions about these type of things going on? Or?
So Anna Kay, my girlfriend, we've been together for 9 years. We're not married. Don't start. Mom is. She knows this. She has to live with me, whereas the rest of you fine folks at home don't. Because she knows this. She knows that, believe it or not, the kind of the mannerisms and the attitude and the sort of, I don't mean adult as in to say like I'm somehow superior or more mature.
Call it bravado.
Yeah, I was like that then as I am now, believe it or not. So because Anna Kay has said, 9-year-old Anna Kay would have been terrified of 9-year-old Alan. But believe it or not, I was confident. Some people will call that arrogance. I reject that. I was confident. I felt confident in what I believed. I felt confident in the role models and the teachers that I had, and I don't mean school teachers. I mean actual people educating me. I believed in those people. I had those types of people around me who nightly news would be on. Because how old would I have been during Gulfstorm? I would have been like 6 or 7 or 8. And you know how it is. You see the night vision cameras you just see the lights and you go out in public or you go to school or you go to work and people are like, yeah, did you see that where they were shooting those missiles? Yeah, man, we've been there, right? I know I'm talking to you about this too. It's like we've all been there where you're like, America, we got
to deserve it. I remember that.
But I was around people that they would see that and they would shake their heads. And so you can't help but notice sometimes you're in a room of people that are all like, yeah, look, they're bombing Baghdad or whatever. But you look in the corner and you see that one person who's shaking their head. And you just can't help but what do they think? I know what all of these people think because they're vocally expressing it. I want to know what that person thinks.
So you had the gumption to go over to this one person in the corner and say, why do you disagree with this?
Yeah, so whether it was, my dad or another good role model where I would go to, I would be like, so tell me then, why should I not be reacting the way everyone else is? And the answer would be, well, this is going to cost so much money.
Yeah.
Or like, haven't you read that every one of them missiles is like $1 million or whatever? And look at all them lights.
Yeah.
Or then maybe when you get a little bit older, you start to develop a little bit more empathy, because little kids don't have empathy.
No,
I don't know. Like, you know this.
I know this.
Children are just evil. Just horrible.
They'll destroy each other.
Just self-absorbed.
Absolutely.
Just monstrous things.
Trust me, I got 4 of them.
Yeah. So there you go. But you get a little bit older and you start to develop empathy, and you start to realize every one of those little lights that was a cruise missile that struck some building, like if we're really giving our fine elected leaders the benefit of the doubt, maybe they were aiming for battery sites or
military
supply depots or whatever.
Yeah.
But I've told the story. Ron Paul, I think, had said this once before. He's like, we don't have the kind of technology where we have these magical little bits of shrapnel that are only heat-seeking towards terrorists or enemy. That's not how it works. It hits the women, it hits the children,
it hits everyone.
It hits the elderly, and I don't even, and believe it or not, I'm going to stop myself right there. I actually don't like that phrase, and I only use it in interviews or in the public.
Okay.
I try not to say that because I think it's demeaning towards men who are non-combatants to say that somehow their life is worth less. So a young man, but who's not in the military, is no less innocent than the woman or the child or the elderly. Look, they're just people. And so when you start to think that every one of those little white lights flying through the green-black little night vision, those are dead people.
Yeah,
and
that's bodies hitting the floor.
And so
those are lives. Those are people who have something to live for.
And so it bothers me. And of course, like again, the true, as I would call it, the true traditional conservative would mimic this view, whereas the modern day neoconservative wouldn't. The modern day hoorah America type is saying, yeah, we got them. And I'm like, do you not? If I'm not even asking you the question. It's more than I'm just making the statement that if you feel nothing for the fact that every one of those little flashes probably resulted in the deaths of at least some innocent people, you're a monster.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna mince words about that. You can't. And so bringing this back around to libertarianism, because I play the game of who is and isn't a real libertarian. And some people are like, you're dividing us. Fuck you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to tell you who is and isn't a real. If you're not staunchly anti-war, if you're not, because anti-war in effect is also pro-life, and I don't necessarily mean that in the abortion sense. I just mean in a having empathy,
in a live and let live.
Yes,
sort of way.
Feeling the value of human life. If that's not a really baseline criteria for you, then you are not a part of my philosophy. You're not.
Exactly. So, do you think that we know? I don't know if all libertarians feel the same way. And one of the questions I've been wanting to ask you, I know how you define libertarianism in that sense, because I think that that's the right way to go, and I think that everybody should be, should at least have some compassion. I mean, even the people out there that disagree with America are still human beings. Okay, but when it comes to some other questions, and this is one thing that I've always wanted to kind of ask you, and it goes to the anarcho-Christian thing. And I know people talk about anarchy, and anarchy being almost a terrifying thing to to conservatives. At what point did you realize that you were an anarchist versus a minarchist or some of these other things? And were you ever a minarchist? Okay, so I definitely was a minarchist. So I would say I was definitely a libertarian since, I mean, if I was developing political thought as 12 years old, I was a libertarian. Gotcha.
I mean, call it being a natural contrarian, call it whatever you want. But I just knew that I was like, that, another like funny little anecdote. I remember being in school. I remember being at McDowell Elementary School, and I remember there being a mock vote between George W. Bush George H.W. Bush for his second term, burn in hell, and Bill Clinton. Hopefully he eventually will burn in hell. And on the one hand, I thought, well, even then I was thinking, who cares? Like, I not only was I thinking, who cares, because I don't see that it makes any difference to me. Like, my life as I live it today, I see that no difference will be made depending on who the principal announces.
I mean, that's way beyond what any other kid in your class would have thought. Yeah,
I'm telling you, I was a scary kid.
Yeah, you were scary.
Yeah, but so for one, who cares? But two, it's also, but who cares what any of you think?
Yeah,
like, I don't care, and I don't mean that in a condescending way.
Sure.
I mean it just more as an absolute. Like, I'm not saying who cares what you think because you're stupid.
Right.
I'm saying who cares what you think because I'll do for me and you do for you.
Exactly.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Right.
And that, you know, and that message can get lost. Like, I get that if you were editing this tape because you're actually the producer and I'm actually the host, and you were to cut that sentence halfway off where it just said, who cares what you think, you're stupid, then it would make me sound like I was a jerk.
Yeah.
I may be a jerk,
but I know,
but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
so,
I mean, I get it.
So I already kind of had that thought, but even all the way up to the early 2000s, like I'm actually voting age and that sort of thing, I was still believing in kind of the Ron Paul, you know, because if you're swept up in the whole Ron Paul movement, you're still attempting to work within the system.
Yeah.
I mean, even if, and I love Ron Paul, and he's like the greatest libertarian of our age, for sure. But the fact that you're trying so hard to work in the system still technically makes you a minarchist. And there's some that I like. You know, I like Thomas Massey from Kentucky. I like Justin Amash from Michigan. And I support what they do, but I don't really hang my hat on that today, because there's the clear distinction between you and I had this conversation before we started the show, is a phrase you'll hear a lot of times is you'll hear people say that, well, there's nothing inherently wrong with the system. There's nothing inherently wrong with the Constitution or the state. The problem is that these horrible representatives have gotten control of power. And so it's a two-prong. We have to limit the amount of power that they have so that it can't be so easily used against us.
Exactly.
And we also have to get the right people in.
Right.
Now, I definitely agree with that first part. We have to limit their power. In fact, if we just abolish the state altogether, boy, it took care of that real quick. So that's where the anarchy thing comes in. But even if you're working within the minarchist framework of, okay, we're going to abide by the Constitution, and that totally works. It doesn't, but that totally works. But we got to elect people who respect it.
Yeah.
How many elections do we have to go through before you realize that's a hopelessly naive point of view? I just asked that. I asked that to the public at large. How many more midterms? How many more presidents? How many more elections do we have to go through before you realize that there's no such thing as the right people? If there were, those people aren't the ones seeking office. Even if they're seeking it, they're not the ones winning. If you believe Ron Paul is the kind of person who's right, that's great.
Yeah.
He actually did seek it. Wonderful.
Yeah.
He didn't win.
Right.
He was never going to win.
Right.
And I genuinely believe in my heart of hearts that if a man like him did win, something horrible would befall him. Because there are powers in this world that relish in that level of authority, and they've worked keenly and over many years to seek it and obtain it. They're not just going to give it up because you plebs all of a sudden decide you want a different sort of ruler.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the Daniel Webster quote. It's one of my favorite ones, that where he's talking about, you know, the politician always says that he'll be a good ruler, but he still intends to rule.
Yeah.
And then of course turning that to kind of more of the little slavery motif of he promises to be a good master, but he means to be the master.
Right.
I don't subscribe to that. I don't subscribe to the idea that there's any way in this world that the right people, I don't think the right people exist to rule over you. I think there is no right person to rule over you but you.
Why would anybody want that job?
And even if by some crazy chance you and me and everyone mutually decided, I think Tim can run Blake better than Blake. And Blake agrees. So we should have Tim do it. Even if that's true, too many of your neighbors won't vote for Tim. And so instead of trying to bang my head against that wall forever, I decided at a pretty young age, I'm done with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so the question then becomes for the rest. And look, I don't expect everyone who's listening to my voice right now, and I don't expect everyone at home to instantly be, that's right, anarchy it is then. That's a point of view that takes a lot of time and study and to come around to. And it's a really hard pill for a lot of people to swallow. But if there's anything I can do to at least crack the door open for them, it's more that I want to abolish the state. That doesn't mean that there will not be governance. That doesn't mean that decisions won't be made for the public. But we're going to get rid of the state as it exists today, or we want to. And we don't want a oligarchy, a small central authority, to have such an enormous amount of power over so many people. It's frankly, if that's a discussion that you feel is worth having, us having the discussion of how many people should be given how much power, then that's a conversation to have. If you feel like there's no room for discussion because the average man is just so beneath your contempt that the power must be placed in the hands of these magnificent few, then the first thing I would say is you're literally a piece of shit and there's no room for us to converse. And the second thing I would say is, as Milton Friedman would say, is where are you going to find these angels to organize society for us? If people are too stupid or ignorant or evil to manage their own lives, and politicians are people, then the whole thing falls apart instantly.
So this question is the one that listening to you talking about anarchy and menarchy and all these things and people being good or bad, do you believe people are inherently good or evil?
I don't believe in people.
You don't believe in people?
I don't believe, because to me that's a collectivist type of a statement, type of a mindset. And this is something that libertarians do as well, and they need to be very careful of. It's when people make statements like, like take the war in Afghanistan, and they say, well, we need to get out of Afghanistan. Well, who's we? We don't need to do shit. I'm not in Afghanistan.
You're right.
I don't want any Americans in Afghanistan. I don't want the American state involved in Afghanistan. I don't want the American government stealing money from me to give to some stupid kids who don't have a better idea how to make money to send them to go die in a poppy field or a desert. I don't want that to be happening. So kill the we. There's no we. There's no a they. There's no a. Well, look what they're doing to us. Who's us? You reach a certain point where if you've been in kind of the anarchy mindset for long enough, those words actually start to make you cringe a little bit, because you just can't help but feel, well, I know, like, look, I'm not an idiot. I know what you're saying. When you say we, you mean the American military, American state, whatever. I'm just trying to really drive the point home to do not collectivize the us and the them and the people and the Tennesseans or the Colombians or me and Blake. Do not put all those things into, there's no, if you truly believe in individualism, then you need to be careful with your words, because there are a lot of people, like I said, even amongst our camp, there's a lot of people that will, whether it's for brevity or whether it's because they actually believe that, they'll make statements like, well, we shouldn't be over there. Well, again, I know what you mean, but don't say it like that. And vice versa. Think of it from the perspective of the random jihadi in Afghanistan who 6 months ago couldn't care less what the United States did, and then some drone strike killed his cousin, and now he hates Americans.
Well, sure.
Now, he hates Americans, but he's wrong. He should be hating the American military because in the state apparatus that oversees it, because they did that to his cousin. And I would never be one to sit here and say, well, he shouldn't feel that way. I'm not going to tell anyone how they should and shouldn't feel. I would be very upset if that happened to one of my loved ones in some far off
faction
body ordered that to have happen, I'd be very upset. I don't want him to, but I don't want him to hate Americans in the same way I don't want you to use the words us and we.
Yeah.
Because you and I didn't do that to his cousin.
No, we didn't.
And I didn't want it to happen.
Yeah.
I'm just as powerless as he is.
Yeah.
I know he doesn't see it that way, and that's why you have terrorist activity and bombings, and that's the way you get things like 9/11 where innocent people die, is because he sees it differently than I wish he did. But I'm not going to be so naive or bullheaded to tell you I don't understand why he sees it that way.
So in other words...
Yeah, I went there.
Yeah. So in other words, you know, what they do to them, they see us as responsible. Yeah, well,
again, and I've used this analogy too. Now think about it. Imagine this guy was well enough off that he was in a community that had a decent enough school, and they've got some social studies textbook from God knows where, and they're learning. Imagine this guy reading a paragraph that says that, you know, over there in the United States, they have a representative republic, and all the people get together and they elect representatives, and they've got this House and the Senate and this presidency, and then they appoint Supreme Court, and they've got these checks and balances. Because that's what we're taught. I mean, that's theoretically how it works, hard quotation marks on that. But in his mind, he's thinking, well, wait a minute, if that's true, then Americans want us to suffer because they elected the people who then turn around and appointed the people who issued the orders to kill my family members. So therefore, Americans must be okay with what's... The Yemenis must be thinking, well, Americans must be fine with us getting bombed and being starved by Saudi Arabia. Americans must be fine with them destroying all the water plants in Iraq and people dying of thirst and 500,000 dead kids and all that. They must be fine with that because their leaders did it and they elect their leaders. And you see the incumbent re-election. They re-elect the same people all the time. Again, that's wrong because I didn't elect none of those people, and I don't approve of anything they're doing. But you could see why they think that way.
Yeah, definitely.
And so if you understand that he's wrong, you can't help but then realize, oh my God, our entire system's bullshit.
It is.
Like you can't help but realize, well, I understand why he feels that way, but he's wrong because it's way more complicated than that. Well, why is it more complicated? Well, it doesn't work that easy, and there's reasons, and different people get elected, and I can't help who California elects or who North Dakota elects or who Florida elects. And and we've got this electoral college, and it always comes down to Florida and Ohio, and whichever way that goes, it'll be a Republican or a Democrat. But it doesn't matter because those are the only two parties that get to run, and one of them, and they're both going to have the same form. I had no control over any of that.
That's right.
And so I'm only given two options. That is, try to work within the system to enact a change, and hey, more power to you if you think that's the route you want to go. You're going to fail spectacularly, but more power to you. Or you reject the whole system. And before anybody says that, well, that just means you're giving up. No, what it means is I'm going to put all my time and effort to living my best life and let those chips fall where they may. Because at least I can control my wallet. Well, except for what they tax me. I can control my work. I can work hard. I can make the money I can make. I can treat my neighbors and friends and family with love and respect. I can try to foster a sense of community around me and my home. I can't control the president. I can't control the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I can't control the drones. I can't control the military-industrial complex. So I'm over all that.
So what then about the LP?
The LP is a total freaking joke. I mean, there's nothing to even be said. They're not libertarians. So this comes back around to our earlier thing about libertarian infighting. It's like, look, when one group of libertarians and another group of libertarians are fighting, way more often than not, I actually get a hoot out of it. And the reason being is that they don't want me to adjudicate which side is right, because my default position is usually, well, none of y'all are libertarians, who cares? And let's face it, like, there's not a lot of people who call themselves libertarians. You're already only talking about like a 2 or 3% of the public.
Right.
Of that group, I would be willing to bet only a fraction of them are actually libertarians, and I mean little L philosophical libertarians. They believe in like. I've seen people write online that, well, not all libertarians believe in the NAP, the non-aggression principle, and I say that's a false premise. It's a false premise because if they don't believe in the non-aggression principle, in my opinion, they're not a libertarian. So if you can't be a so the whole thing falls apart. Like a lot of people will say, like for instance, I'm not a minarchist, I'm an anarchist, and it's because I reject the state. I reject its moral and ethical authority. I think it's logically inconsistent. If you believe these people who have taxation as theft posted all over their Facebook, and they've got their little black and gold background because they think they're anarcho-capitalist. If those same people will then turn around and say that, well, look, I'm not an anarchist. I understand there's a need for No, you don't get it. You don't get it. Do you think any of your philosophical opponents are going to give you cede to you even an inch of ground in order to make any points? No, they will stomp you at every turn because they reject your entire worldview. It's a sobering reminder to all of us that the overwhelming majority of people are not libertarians. The overwhelming majority of people who call themselves libertarians, in my opinion, are not libertarians. And I don't say this to leave the episode with a depressing point. What I say is that don't be so concerned about how many there is in the camp. Sure as hell don't go join the LP and give money to some bozo like a Gary Johnson or a Bill Weld or a Larry Sharp. Yeah, I went there. Come at me. Like, don't go give those idiots money. You keep your money. I want you to build your wealth. I want you to live a good life. I want you to love your family. I want you to raise your kids. I want you to be a successful libertarian. That is so much more valuable than you trying to get some bozo elected. I don't care what letter's next to their name.
I get it.
Have I pissed off everybody yet?
Yeah, just about.
Good.
Last question.
All right.
I got 2 more.
Okay.
We got about 10 more minutes.
Okay.
Can you be a libertarian and not be an anarchist?
Can you be a libertarian and not be an anarchist? Most people would say yes, because there's the minarchist crowd.
We've already covered that.
I think you start to get into some of the deeper weeds of, even in an anarchist society, that doesn't mean that we wouldn't have governance. That's why it's oftentimes you'll hear us talk about the state, not the government.
Right.
Because when you say the government, of course, in our context, you probably mean the United States government.
Sure.
You can still have something that resembles a government. So if you have a community, think of like your homeowners association type of a thing, which most of those are awful. But hold on. Now you agreed to move into this neighborhood. That neighborhood has an association that has rules. You've agreed to those rules, and therefore you've moved in. And the idea being is that if everyone's agreeing to a basic set of principles, then the community is going to be enriched because like-minded folks are going to live peacefully together.
Yeah.
That is a form of governance.
Yeah.
That's not the evil.
Right.
I mean, because our opponents are the type of people that'll say, "Oh my Lord, if you anarchist," because what's anarchist? That's the guy wearing a bandana. And he's throwing Molotov cocktails. That's the
conservative fear.
He's kicking over trash cans and breaking into Starbucks. Like that's nonsense.
That's not it.
But even deeper than that, there's the types that would say that, well, in the anarchist society, the warlords will take over and murder and rape and pillaging will be rampant because there'll just be nothing to stop it. That's such a lack of imagination. Because you think about, I've heard it said, and I like the way they put it, is most of your life is lived in anarchy. We're living in anarchy right now because we don't literally have the cops in this room pointing guns at us, telling us how to put together this interview. We just do it. You and I just sat down and decided we're going to do it like this. You think of, now granted, people driving cars way more often than not are idiots. And I know we have traffic laws for if the light's out, it's a four-way stop, blah, blah, blah. But still, how often have you been near an accident or, you know, someone's dropped something at the grocery store or whatever? It doesn't result in a gunfight. Way more often than not, people go around, somebody will drop to help, whatever. I have to... Because you asked me earlier if people were inherently good or evil, and I kind of sidestepped that question with the I don't want to go into the lumping everyone together. But I will say, way more often than not, people do have a basic moral compass to understand, like, I can't just walk down the street and stab someone in the chest.
Right.
You just know that that's, whether you know that that's morally wrong or that you know, logistically speaking, it would end poorly for you because other people would
intervene.
Other people would say, excuse me, sir, you can't do that. You just know that that's not a way to go about society. Yes. But the point being is people can do that. People do that every day.
Sure. Yeah.
They don't need that. Like, we don't actually have to have a full-on guy in riot gear with an AR-15 or whatever, an M4 on every single street corner, like eyeing down every single person that passes by to make sure, like, you're not doing anything wrong. We don't need that.
Right.
Why don't we need that?
It's because people have a built-in moral compass.
Well, that's fine to believe. Even if you think a lot of people don't, it's the marketplace of ideas, just like the marketplace economically, the marketplace socially and morally and everything. I truly believe in the market, but I believe in the market. I believe the market extends to more things than just the economic marketplace. People understand that. Well, I live in this town. And if I get a reputation as the guy who runs down the street and drop kicks old ladies, I'm going to be shunned in this town very quickly. Right. People won't do business with me. Restaurants won't let me eat.
You're right.
I can't go by because everybody will say, "Hey, get that guy out of here. He drops kicks old ladies." That's okay. And that's not bullying, by the way. Shame is a good thing. Yeah. Society is signaling to you, we don't want you to act this way. And if it's something so egregious to you that you can't live that way, then you'll have to find another community to live in. But that community is letting you know, hey, Blake, don't drop kick old ladies. Right. Like, once was enough, you know, or whatever the case may be. I do inherently believe that is the way the world can, would, and should work.
It's very idealistic of you.
Without, well, I disagree with that. Okay. I disagree with that completely. What's idealistic is this concept that we can have this monolithic state with all the guns and all the power. That's idealistic and they can tell everyone exactly how they're supposed to live. That, to me, is idealistic.
Very true.
As opposed to letting people figure it out.
I think that people, when they listen to you, find reason. Yeah. That's a good thing.
So I should announce my candidacy for...
Just not with the LP. No. Not with the LP.
Oh, Lord, no.
Last question.
Okay.
We talk many times about a hot dog being a sandwich.
Yeah.
This is my question for you.
Okay.
Does a sandwich have to have bread to be a sandwich?
Does a sandwich have to have bread? Yes.
Why?
A sandwich has to... Because a sandwich is any combination of any toppings, condiments, meats, vegetables, anything.
But what if you put them between two slices of lettuce?
That is sandwiched in between bread.
Okay.
Hence, it's sandwiched.
So by your theory, a burrito is a sandwich.
A burrito. That's a wrap.
But it's bread.
But it's wrapped. It's not sandwiched, though, you see.
So it's one continuous piece. So then you're telling me...
Because think of the word sandwiched.
Sandwich, sure, okay.
Yeah.
It's like a taco. But so is a quesadilla a sandwich?
Yes.
It's a sandwich. You heard it here, folks. According to Alan Mosley, a quesadilla.
A quesadilla is a sandwich.
We'll be arguing that with the next guest. You just watch.
Yeah. Alan? I'm going to bring that up now.
Anything else?
No. I think, you know what, I've probably pissed off every possible niche audience that we have.
Just about, because we didn't really cover economics very much.
We didn't cover economics very much.
We can go there, but we don't have a lot more time. So,
like, I'd like to think somewhere right now out in the ether, there's still like those 3 people who I would actually call genuine, logically consistent libertarians. And they're like, yeah, right on, man. All the other people are like, You can't.
If they hung on to this point to find out that a quesadilla is in fact a sandwich.
Here's what I would say. All of those people that are listening right now that are saying, you can't just tell me I am or am not a libertarian. To them I say, of course I can. I just did. There you go.
Ladies and gentlemen, Facebook. We are Facebook/TGS Alan Mosley. Of course, you can find us on Twitter at Alan M. Mosley. And you don't have to do any of that because...
You can find us on the web at thegoldstandardpodcast.com.
That's right.
It's new and improved, by the way.
Good.
Rob has done some upgrades to it. We now have all of our articles on thegoldstandardpodcast.com.
Good. All right. Can we be looking for any new articles coming out anytime soon?
Well, we just released the one on Eric Swalwell and his comments about gun confiscation.
Good.
We have another one coming out that I believe will be on Mises.org first. That's actually going to talk about the American bombing using the A-bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in World War II, and how that is absolutely morally abhorrent. Because remember, you have to be anti-war and pro-human life to be a libertarian.
That's right. That's right. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next time.